as we segue into the next phase here. Hey Dan, how's it going? My good friend Dan Fishman came here, and he was so gracious. 2014, the candidate interviews. I've rubbed shoulders with him in the years following as the elections for governor came around. And he is coming to our what's the Tea Party thing next month.
Yep.
Correct, next month. And I'm trying to get hold of Massey Campos, or Campos Massey. What's his name there?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's somebody.
He's the guy who's coming in that.
Yeah, he's going to debate.
Sort of debate, yes.
Yeah, he's going to sort of debate it. So anyway, what have you been doing? How's the Libertarian Party? What's take over?
Pretty good. Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but I was the Northeast director for the Johnson Weld campaign, and so last 6 months of the election were pretty crazy for me. But since then, we've been sort of planning. You know, Libertarians now have major party status in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Now, of course, one of the things that the Democrats have done is that they try to punish you if you want to run against them. So one of the things about that is that since now we are a major party now, we can no longer get signatures from either Republicans or Democrats to run for office.
Wait, where's before?
Yeah, when you're not a major party and you're not a serious.
So now wait a minute. Now you can only get them from other libertarians.
From libertarians and unenrolled, which is 52%.
Right.
But essentially 48% of the population is saying no, you can't get signatures from them anymore. So our candidate running for Senate is going to have to get 15,000 signatures from the 52% of unenrolled voters in Massachusetts. And that's a tough poll. What it does is it puts down your validation rate, and it makes it much, much more expensive to collect signatures. Like right now, when we go out, chances are pretty good that most of the signatures we gather, especially when we go door to door, are going to be accurate. We usually found that we're running well over 80% in terms of validation because we could gather from anybody.
Right.
But now, people sign all the time. They say, yeah, I'm happy to sign. But if they're not actually unenrolled, we can't count their signatures anymore.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's something the Democrats have done for years. They put more and more barriers in place. I was going to say,
is this a strictly Democrat thing? Is this like some little weird rule?
It's absolutely, I mean, it's not
Who the
completely
comes
unheard
up
of,
with this
but
stuff,
ours.
and why?
Well, because we've had one party rule here for so
Sure,
long
right.
that the Democrats have done this. For example, in New Jersey, where New Jersey is a pretty blue state. I wouldn't say that they elect a lot of Republicans, but in New Jersey, the signature requirement to run for Congress is 100 signatures. That's reasonable, right? 100 signatures shows that you're serious.
Boom, you're in the race.
Exactly. Here, it's very much meant as a barrier to entry. And the thing about it is because the way they set it up, and the Democrats required you to have a town committee in each town. So what that means is that when they gather signatures, every town committee hands out 3 signature sheets. They bring them all in. Boom, they're done. That works for them. Doesn't work for the Republicans. Certainly won't work for the Libertarians. They've been setting it up that way for a long time. But we're not going to knuckle under. One of our big successes way back
these people are evil. It's just talking about evil.
Well, so it's interesting though because sometimes we make a difference. One of the big successes of the Libertarian Party in Massachusetts was way back in the 80s when you wanted to petition. Like you remember the tank the gas,
right?
Right. If you wanted to petition in those days, the requirement for the sheet of paper was 18 inches by 2 feet. So it was this big.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't actually run it through a printer or a copy machine. You had to take it to a professional printer to get the sheets turned out.
Cost,
exactly,
money, right.
Exactly, because the Democrats didn't care because they already had all that stuff and they control the legislature.
Right.
So they didn't need the people.
They'll make it more and more difficult and more expensive. They'll regulate and taxate you out of business.
Exactly. So one of the things that the Libertarian Party did back then, and this is probably one of our biggest successes, Carla Howell had some big things as well, those that we went out and we petitioned and we gathered 100,000 signatures on those giant sheets of paper saying, look, it's ridiculous that we can't do it on a legal sheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it, 8.5 by 14?
Sure, right.
You run through?
Yeah, the new petitions, I remember when I was doing the gas thing, they were normal.
Exactly.
I mean, they were legal size, not 8.5 by 11 like a sheet of paper.
Right.
No, but they were that legal size.
At least you can run them through a Xerox machine.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, you and I are probably the only ones who remember those as Xerox machines.
Yeah, exactly.
But exactly. And so that's an example of like one of the things that we've done, and it's getting better. People are waking up to the fact that one party rule has ruined this state. There's another great example of that in the gas tax. This is one of my favorite stories because now I travel around a little bit, talk to people in other states about things, and I say, you guys don't understand what it's like in Massachusetts. But let me give you an example. I mean, first of all, there's, my 2012 race where I ran against Richard Jesse, the Republican, out married, pro-choice gay man, and the Democrat, John Tierney, personally pro-life. His wife had gone to jail for 30 days for money laundering. So those are the sort of...
they were perfect candidates. Typical Massachusetts candidates.
Exactly.
I see exactly where Dan's going with this.
Well, I mean, that's a badge of honor for them.
Have you served in jail? Run for Senate.
Right, exactly. No, right. For a Democrat, you got to have a little bit of that in your back.
Exactly right.
But the gas tax, again, is a favorite example of one of the things that's really crazy about Massachusetts politics. So when the gas tax is first proposed by DeLeo, right, I don't remember exactly what the exact number was, but Deval Patrick vetoed it. He vetoed it because he didn't think it raised taxes enough. Well, that's a Deval Patrick kind of take on this whole thing.
Right.
DeLeo overrode his veto. Only in Massachusetts can the Democratic Speaker of the House override the veto of the Democratic governor and have enough votes to make it stick. Because we are one party rule. Every Republican actually voted along to support the governor's veto, and like 8 Democrats. It's probably the only thing that Deval Patrick has voted on that he had more Republican support than Democratic support. But because we have this crazy one-party system, it's completely different.
The automatic gasoline tax was very nefarious for several reasons. It would have been a runaway taxation. Everything, of course, as we know in the United States of America and the 21st century world, is everything is run by fuel. I don't care what it is or where it comes from or how it's made, it's all run by fuel. If fuel prices go up, then guess what? This cup of coffee just went up, my computer just went up in price. Everything goes up in price. They were going to index the gasoline tax to inflation. What did I just say 5 seconds ago? Everything is contingent on the price of fuel. So if the prices of things go up, then if the price of fuel goes up, then the price of everything goes up. That's called inflation, folks. You see the circle jerk that goes on here? Prices go up, then the gasoline tax has to go up. Then prices go up, gasoline tax go up. It's a circle all the way around. It was probably one of the most nefarious taxes I had ever seen.
And the thing that bothered me the most about it is that if you want to raise taxes, I'm against that. But at least stand up for it, raise taxes, and let people vote for their representatives. Exactly
put some sort of codification behind it. Say this is why, this is what's happening, this is what we have to do.
And do it every year. Don't abscond on your ability as a representative.
I remember that too. The Leo thing. It's like they passed some Senate, some House rule or something, House and Senate rule here at Beacon Hill that you have no more debates on taxes. They're just going to either vote for them so that they don't have to sign their name.
Exactly right. So that the representatives no longer have to have the consequences of saying to the people they represent, yes, I raised your taxes. And that's wrong. I mean, that is fundamentally wrong because there has to be some level of accountability. The whole point of the title, representative, is that you are representing the people who voted for you.
Right, you answer to them.
Exactly. You have to have some level of accountability. And if you don't do that, if you take that away, why do we even pretend at having a government anymore? Why don't we just say that we have, sort of a fiefdom and 5 or 6 people who are running things? Because that's the way they want to go with this. And that really is the way it is. The speaker runs everything at this point in time.
Yes.
I mean, Charlie and I disagree on some things, Governor Baker and I disagree on some things politically, but I respect the fact that he's trying to find a way through this maze that they've set up in front of him and saying, what are the 3 things that I can possibly sneak through here?
How would you rate him? How would you rate him? Go ahead. It's just your personal.
So I think that in terms of leadership, stepping out, saying these are the things that I want to do, addressing the problems that were broken, he's done a very good job in terms of leading and saying this is what we want. And the ideas that we're pushing forward, like the idea that, for example, the trains when the MBTA essentially shut down, and he's done a good job of auditing that, finding out that $3 billion of equipment that they had and they're just not using. And so they want to buy all this new equipment, all stuff like that is good.
Actually, using what we already bought.
Exactly.
I guess there's a plant that's going to go up in Springfield. They're actually going to be either servicing the cars or building some of the new cars that are coming out.
Some of that stuff is great. On the other hand, the complete failure when Maura Healey decides to rewrite the assault weapons law, that's terrible, and that's not leadership.
The whole climate change thing when she wanted to subpoena all the records.
She's
crazy anyway. There's something wrong with her.
What we need more than anything else all the time is transparency in government. And our government right now in Massachusetts is built to not be transparent. It's built to be these 4 or 5 people really making all the decisions. And that's especially frustrating when we've had, is Maura Healey's contention that Deval Patrick and Martha Coakley weren't liberal enough that they couldn't make the assault weapon bill correct when they were there? Or is she saying that she's smarter than them and she understands the law better? I don't understand what the rationale is to say all the previous Democratic governors and attorney generals didn't understand the assault weapon bill, and I have to be the one to reclassify it. I know that now there is some legal, there are some lawsuits going on to try to push
that's going to fail. The whole climate change thing that went right up her, you know what, and that came to a crashing halt. This is going to also. Chris Pinto for
Gold.
Goal is the other guy there. Chris Pinto is Mass Gun Rights Association. He was at our Tea Party last month, and this guy's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on as far as, and he's managed to put together quite the lobbying group, quite the opposition to it, petition signing, and really being a thorn in the side. And I think he's going to be one of these people that really spearheads that whole demise of all.
Well, that's good. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to meet Chris at a few different events, and there's no question he's one of those guys that his issue is about liberty. Okay, and he's a gun owner and he advocates that stuff, but he recognizes the fact that our whole point of the Second Amendment is that it's your right. It's not a liberty that's granted you by government, it's your right. And when the government tries to get in there and restrict that, you really start to get into questions about how authoritarian is government and
There's already too many anyway. There's already too many. I mean, I understand you don't want people who are mentally disabled getting guns, but I mean, it's just, the longer I've been doing the show and the more that I keep coming across this Second Amendment thing, the more I come to realize that the simple language of the Second Amendment was made that simple for a reason, is to make sure that everybody is allowed to be, not only defend themselves, but to stand up against the tyranny. The minute you start regulating anything, you are permitting anything, that's the first step to infringement. What part of shall not be infringed do you not understand? But now, because we're 100+ years since the turn of the last century, and 100+ years beyond even when the Constitution was written, people have this mindset now in their heads of, well, we have to have some sort of law, we have to have some sort of regulation, and we have to deny this, and we have to restrict this, and we have to do those background checks. And people rationalize this in their brains. And again, folks, I'm not saying that, hey, just everybody, let everybody have guns. I understand that argument. But here in Massachusetts, it's damn near impossible for a law-abiding citizen to actually, it takes a long time. The permitting process is completely outrageous. It's up to the city, police chief or something, and if he doesn't like you, because I know that happened to me in Northborough.
Well, and one of the things that we talk about all the time is that, there are so many examples of people being discriminated against by the police force for race, color, religion, whatever. Boston is a great example of that, okay? Population of Boston, African American, is, I want to say it's 12% of the city, but they get stopped by the police 70% of the time. 70% of the people police stop. Can you imagine if you're an African American, you own a small business, and you want to go get a gun, you have to talk to
protect your business.
Exactly right. That's the the number one reason that people apply for concealed carry permits is people who have either their businesses to protect or their homes to protect, something like that. They have a legitimate reason to do it. The idea that he can go before the police chief, and the police chief is like, well, you
were arrested 3 times last year. It's like, dude, yeah, look, for what?
Not even that. He's going to make him have to justify it. He's going to say, give me a better reason. And we know that the Boston police force has had some issues in the past. It's ridiculous that a non-elected official gets to decide whether or not you get to have your constitutional rights. Because your rights, like I said before, your rights are not liberties that government gives to you. They're your rights. The founders set them up that way. I always go back to the mighty words of the Declaration of Independence: certain inalienable rights.
Sure.
That there's nothing the government should be able to do to take those away from you. And they enumerate those in the Bill of Rights. That's exactly what they were writing out, saying, no matter what, these things we're never going to touch. Speech, etc.
There's some interesting statistics too. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but folks, believe it or not, there's two camps here. There's one where people are what we call legal gun owners. They're registered, they're regulated, everything, they do their firearms training, they get their certificates renewed every year, this, that, the other thing. Of course, we all know that there's a huge majority of people out there that own guns, quote unquote, illegally. I'm always loath to use those two terms, legal and illegal. I could kill you with my toaster. Does that make it an illegal ownership of a toaster? But one of the statistics that's out there is that even though we all know criminals, they don't care about gun laws, they're going to get guns anyway. The amount of people that own guns illegally, I'm using that term euphemistically, overwhelms the amount of people that own guns illegally who are criminals. A criminal element is a very small element. Yeah, it may seem like they're huge and they're running rampant in the street. Crimes and criminals, they're a small element in society. The vast majority of guns owned illegally are owned by normal people who can't get a gun legal. And they own them because of what Dan just said. They have a legitimate reason. I live in a bad neighborhood. I own a business. I can't get a gun. I need to protect my business, or something's going on with my family.
Mark Feldman was Libertarian presidential candidate last cycle, and in the Libertarian presidential debate, Larry Elder asked him, he said, "What do you think about gun control?" He said, "I'm in favor of it. I think people should control their guns." Now, I don't want outlaws to have guns. I don't know how to stop them. They don't follow the law.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And that's exactly the attitude that we should have. We should recognize the fact that you should not try to punish people who've done nothing wrong because you're worried about the behavior of a few bad apples. If we go to the point that we're going to start limiting everybody's rights because we say there's a small percentage of people who have done something wrong, who might do something wrong, that should never be a restriction on your liberty and my liberty.
Sure.
Now, our liberty should trump everything else, as long as we've not done anything wrong, as long as we're not hurting anybody else. And that's the change that I think the country is finally coming to. Mm-hmm. As crazy as it sounds, it's a crazy election cycle, right? And we have Trump in power. He's the president. Okay, he is our leader, our ruler in chief. I thought one of the classiest things that Obama ever said was, he said, "We want you to do well now because you're the president, and if you do well, the country does well." And so I appreciate that.
I remember you said that.
Yeah,
that handshake scene
exactly
in
right.
the White House.
Exactly, and so I appreciate that sentiment, and I have the same feeling that I want the country to do well. The idea of the United States, like people always ask me, "Why did you get into politics?" And I don't really think that I'm in politics, but whatever. It's why did you get into politics? You have a good job, you make a lot of money, you don't have to do this stuff. And you in the past have said that you hate politics, and it's true. I do sort of hate so many aspects of politics, but I could not hate politics so much that I do not love this country more. And so if I can come and contribute to the conversation and somehow get us all talking together, and I don't have to be right, I do not have to be right for us to work, but we all have to be talking. We all have to have our piece of the pie. And if that's what's happening out right now, that the conversation is expanding and people are actually waking up to the fact, you know what? Democrats, I understand that they are upset right now, okay? They didn't understand that Republicans were upset in exactly the same way during the Obama administration. So if this wakes them up to the fact that, you know what? Maybe there's too much power in the central government in the first place. If you are worried about what the president can do, maybe the president has too much power. Okay, maybe he shouldn't be able to affect your individual life in that respect. Maybe the checks and balances should be pushed back to a lower level. States are supposed to have powers. Like, I don't like to say the phrase states' rights because in the Constitution it specifically says states have powers.
Yes.
Only people have rights.
Correct.
And that's a mistake that we make all the time because
very good.
All power is supposed to derive from the people, you and me. And we have the power of the ballot box, but we also have the power of the fact that government can be us. We can run for office. We can be representatives.
Right, us. We can do it.
Exactly right. I mean, again, I keep.
And getting back to what you said about the Democrats pulling the shenanigans with signatures, that's just more abuse of the power.
Right, exactly right. And they do it. They did it because they could. And what happens is, I mean, here's the thing too: is that if we look at what's happened, look at the Republican and the Democrat flip flop on the filibuster and the nuclear option. Right, 2013. Republicans are right.
Yep, they were upset, don't do it.
Exactly.
Now that it's here,
exactly.
The Democrats are screaming.
Right. But you know what? It's exactly the same thing on Syria, right? 2013, Trump tweets out, Mr. President, do not attack Syria. It would be the biggest mistake you'll ever make. And now they attack Republicans flip-flop. These guys that we're electing, and this is not the people, this is the party.
Mm-hmm.
The professional politicians.
Yes.
Who all they care about. So I went to go to the Boston Young Americans for Liberty group. Cliff Mahoney gave a nice speech there. One of the
we
things
had YAL here sitting in the studio a couple of
I
weeks
saw
ago.
the sticker right here.
Yeah,
I love it. They're good guys. He said, you know, politicians only care about three things: getting elected, getting reelected, and getting elected to higher office.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about the number of famous American politicians who have switched parties, how does that happen? What happened that you can suddenly radically change your viewpoint, right? Arlen Specter, right, goes from being a Democrat to, or goes from being a Republican to a Democrat. A bunch of other examples in this,
Sure.
and it's mind-boggling. And the reason why is because once people get into office, they get addicted to the power, as opposed to actually representing the people. And so, one of the things that's really I've only really changed my mind on two political positions in my life. Changed my mind on the death penalty. I used to be in favor of the death penalty. I've come to think that we can't trust the justice system enough. And even though I think there are a lot of people who deserve death, Joe Carsonayev, right? I mean,
Sure.
Absolutely, exactly. I do it. I don't want to give the Justice Department that power because there are too many people that are getting arrested, and we see evidence of manufactured evidence, stuff like that. So, if the price I have to pay is that assholes like Joe Carr rot in jail, I'll live with that. But the other position that I've changed on very recently is I've come to support term limits. And I was against term limits for a long time. And the reason why is because I believe that voting is political speech, and I never want to restrict the First Amendment. I think the First Amendment, there's a reason why it's first. We have the second to defend the first. And even though I disagree with their choice, when I ran in 2012, 180,000 Democrats re-elected John Tierney to his 9th consecutive term.
Yeah.
That's too much.
That's
he should have been in there, but I would not want to take away from those 180,000 people their right to vote for the candidate of their choice. And, you know, we sort of recognize that because it used to be that, you know, the president was not restricted in terms of terms. Roosevelt ran for 3 terms. And they said that's enough, but they recognized the fact that to change that, they had to amend the Constitution.
Yes.
Right? So
we're going to have to do it for that.
Yep. I'm ready for that now. I'm ready
and
for us to amend
here's the thing, too, and I've been on the fence. I'm still somewhat on the fence about term limits. When you got somebody like a Tierney who's been in there nine terms,
Yep.
the evil that starts happening is they develop a huge war chest. Dan was just saying about how the Democrats changed the rules for getting the petitions to get, you know, libertarian candidates. This is what happens. This is the corruption that ends up happening. So term limits, yeah, you're in there for so long, you got to get your work done, and then you're out of there. And then it turns the power back to the people because, now we have, it's not just a re-election of Joe Schmo. Now Joe Schmo's terms are up. Now you've got a whole new crop of people, and it allows more people like yourself, me, the guy next door, to say, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring.
Well, and so one of the...
It opens up the gates.
Exactly. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people miss out on is understanding that at this point in time, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, the DNC, Democrat National Committee, they are incorporated. They are actually corporations.
They are.
And the reason why is because they're selling something. They are selling elections. And they'll do whatever they can. So, like my 2012 race, that year, Tierney and Tassay both spent $4 million each. It was the most expensive congressional campaign in the United States that year. And when I was looking through their donor list, because I'm like, well, you know, who are the guys who give them a lot of money? Because maybe I hit them up and say, oh, you know, I'm in the race.
How'd you like to throw me a check?
Exactly right. So, the first person I came across who had given money to John Tierney was Martha Coakley for Senate. Her exploratory campaign from 2010 that didn't even go anywhere. She didn't run.
Right.
But she collected like $150,000 in donations.
Jesus.
And so she's just funding candidates.
So now she can do it, right?
Exactly right.
Now isn't there some sort of law because she decided not to run? Now that is basically a slush fund now.
Well,
Just go ahead. You can spend the money any way you want.
You can't spend money that you collect for a federal campaign on a state election.
Okay.
And vice versa. Unless, of course, you're Martha Coakley. She got busted for it by the FEC, and she had to pay a $25,000 fine, I think.
Slap on them.
Exactly right.
You'd be in jail.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly what it was. And, but it's an example of sort of the hypocrisy, because she was the Attorney General. She was the highest ranking law official in Massachusetts.
Only in Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Only in Massachusetts.
And so that's one of those things, too, that, is sort of starting to wake up to the idea that the corporations have become expert at collecting money and running campaigns. 60 Minutes did a wonderful special last year on the Congressional Call Center. And I'd never heard of it before. They showed that every congressman, when they come in, they're expected to do what they call dialing for dollars.
That's it.
So at the end of every day...
My good friend Patrick Barron, years ago on the Meat and Potato Show, came on, described that whole thing. He called it defining the machine. He came up with the whole...
Yeah.
He exposed the whole damn thing.
Yeah, and it is... it's crazy.
And if you don't, your party won't fund your next re-election.
Exactly right. And that's what's amazing about it. So, Seth Moulton, who, some people, he's going to be running for president soon, he's going to be the next senator from Massachusetts, whatever. He's certainly a rising superstar in the Massachusetts Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. But he has to go, and he has to sit in a 5x5 cube. No, they're all in cubes together. They wear the little headsets, and it comes up on the thing, and it's like they're telemarketers. They're reading from a script. Hi, it's Seth. I'm raising money for Democratic Committee. We're trying to fight against Donald Trump here, and we need you to come in. And all they're doing is raising money into the war chest for... Exactly. It's insane. And again, it's one of those things that, Democrats all the time say, we're so worried about all the money in politics. And yet, they created these special laws, these special pacts, where if the state committees sign in, they go into a system where they can raise, for every state committee that signs in, a maximum of $10,000 donation per person. So they get all 50 states signed in. That's how Hillary was able to have that dinner at $323,000 a plate, because, they set up the system. And that's where a problem has gone. And I'm never going to be a person like I thought Russ Feingold was a terrible law. I think that restrictions on speech are always bad, even if they're influencing elections and stuff like that. This is one of my things.
Even the Citizens United. What is it? Citizens United.
Citizens United.
I mean, I think the Supreme Court was right in that.
Absolutely.
I understand the Pandora's box it opens up. But really, the Worcester Tea Party is a corporation. Let's say we wanted to fund a campaign. Somehow we're restricted or we're not allowed to.
Right,
or
exactly.
Something. Really? So our voices, the 1,000 or so people that we have in our group, our voices don't matter?
Exactly. Well, I say this all the time. What people don't realize is that 98% of the corporations in the United States are corporations of one person. Your dentist, your plumber, carpenter.
Sure, that's right.
They incorporate to protect themselves so that if something were to go wrong in the business, they don't lose their house.
Right.
Okay, that's the idea of a corporation, is sort of to protect you.
Yeah, you just take the assets from the business or whatever, sure.
At no point in time, though, does people coming together in a corporation make them lose their individual rights to speech. So if they want to pool their resources and spend money on a political campaign, of course they should be able to. The Citizens United, the Supreme Court got it exactly right. The ACLU even says, this is it. Mm-hmm. You can't restrict speech.
Yes.
If you want to, if you're worried about people having issues and not getting heard, find a way to elevate everybody else's speech. Give money to their campaigns, whatever you want. The answer is not to restrict the candidate's speech. And one of the things that I like to do all the time, this blows Democrats' minds when you say it to them. You go to a Democrat and you say, so I'm going to guess you probably voted for Barack Obama in 2012 against Mitt Romney. They're like, of course I did. So, Mitt Romney, wealthy guy. How much money would he have had to spend to get you to vote Republican? They're like, I would never vote Republican. I'd never vote Republican. I'm like, so why are you worried about the amount of money that they're putting into politics? How much, you say that there's no amount of money that he could spend, so why do you think that you have to restrict it? They're like, well, because, he's going to trick other people. I'm like, so you're saying you're smarter than the average voter. Right. The average voter is going to get fooled.
Or the DNC raising millions of dollars. They're better at it.
Exactly. And then they say, oh, no, it's not that I'm better, but I'm like, oh, that's what you're saying. You're saying that you think you're immune to the money in politics, but the average voter is not. Why can't the average voter be just as smart and just as informed as you? And then they start to pull their hair out and they go, exactly. And that's, I love
Dan's a racist. You're a racist.
You're
a homophobe, Islamophobe, racist.
Well, I tell you what's funny though is that so a lot of what we do right now is I try to think about how do I get to approach these people? How do I get to approach the people who are so set in their ways that they are going to use tactics like that? Mm-hmm. And so I have this. We went down to the Tax Day rally. You know, they didn't have the Tax Day rally at the Common that you and I have always bumped into each other on all the time.
Right. There was a whole different group.
Such a different group.
Tell us. I didn't go. Go ahead. Tell the story.
So we go down to on Cambridge Common,
right.
And it's essentially an anti-Trump rally. And so we're out there and we're representing, you know, limited government, smaller government. We have our big sign up that says, liberty is when gay married couples can protect their marijuana fields with their own guns. And Democrats come by and they like it at the beginning. They're like, yeah, well, no, yes, no. And so then we start talking.
Well, Democrats compartmentalize their anger. They do.
Exactly. And so
selective outrage, it's called.
Right. And so we start to engage them. And so we wanted to find a way to bring our message to the people who didn't want to hear it. How do you start talking to a group of Democrats and say, you know what, government's out of control. You've got to find a do it. Mm-hmm. So I have this little anecdote that I came up with. This is sort of what I tell. I say, you know, one of the problems that we're recognizing right now is that laws that we make require law enforcement, which injects force into our society. And so if you're concerned that our society's become too violent, we got to think about how did we get there. Let me give you a couple examples of things that happened. Now, one, there are two girls who were selling lemonade in Dallas. They wanted to raise money for their father's birthday party, and so they're out on the street. Dallas police roll up,
yes,
shut them down because they don't have a food license and they can't sell.
And no permit, right?
No permit. Now, fortunately for them, there was a reporter there at the time, and they said to him, they said, well, tomorrow we're going to be giving away lemonade, and anybody who wants to make a donation to our dad's birthday party, come on by. Because you can give away lemonade for free. You don't have to have a permit for that. It's always allowed. It's one of these.
Donation thing is
and donation,
the language.
Exactly right. That's exactly what it is. And it worked. They raised $1,000 for their dad's birthday party.
Well, especially since the news got hold of it.
Oh, exactly. Happy ending to that story. It's wonderful. Now, second example of where we have a sort of a stupid law. University of California in Berkeley, one of the great institutions in the United States, has these incredible archives of classes that they put online for free. You want to take a class at UC Berkeley, You're not going to get a degree, but you're going to be able to learn there. Some of the classes have video components to them, and they're 20 years old. Berkeley put them online. Gallaudet University, which is a school for the deaf, complained. They said, you do not close caption these videos. And Berkeley's like, look, we're just putting them online for free. We're not going to close caption them. If we keep these as private classes, we don't have to close caption them. So we don't want to be penalized just because we're putting it online for free. Gallaudet went to the Department of Justice, says the American with Disabilities Act says that if you're going to offer a free class, it has to be publicly accessible. So Berkeley's like, we're not going to pay $100,000 to fix all these tapes. And so they just pulled these classes available from being online. Okay, and that's an example of a really stupid law. Okay, and the enforcement that happened, nobody went to jail over it, but it ended up being a pretty significant impact on a lot of people who weren't able to take that class. People lost a resource because of it.
And with technology on your computer, you can use Dragon or something. It can listen to the playback and print it all out.
Exactly, but
it's ridiculous.
Right, people who want to take a
it's like these people who specifically target Christian bakeries for a gay wedding, and then sue them. And right next door, there could be another bakery owned by gay people.
Yeah.
But they do that specifically. They target specifically.
Well, so I'll come back to that because I have a very, very nuanced position on that. And I'll get to that in a second. But, so the third example that I talk with, laws require law enforcement that injects force into our society. Eric Garner, African-American man living in New York City, father of 6, had a regular Joe job, came home every day, stopped at the bodega by his house, bought a pack of cigarettes, sold them loose on the street, what they call loose cigarettes.
Right.
And a pack of cigarettes in New York City is $14 now, which is ridiculous.
Sure.
20 packs, so he would make $6 a day. He would go back into the bodega, buy hamburger, hot dogs, turkey, whatever, some form of meat, bring that home, cook. Of course, that's illegal.
Right.
You can't resell cigarettes, even though you bought them.
And they're yours.
You're right.
It's your property.
Exactly. And it's especially illegal because for the government, that's tax revenue. That's when they start to get serious about the law enforcement. So the police show up. They say, what you're doing is illegal. Exactly. And you know what? There is something to be said for the fact that if he had immediately done what they said, accepted being arrested, and gone downtown, maybe he'd still be alive today. But he started arguing. He said, look, guys, I got 6 kids upstairs. They're expecting me to come home. Look, I'll give you the money I got. I won't do it anymore. I can't go to jail. I'm the only adult in the house. I'm going home. I'm bringing food. We're going to cook. Just let me go up there. Cut me a break here. Is that a line? Is that whatever? I don't know. But I don't think it's unreasonable for a person in his position to say that and to try to say, can't we work something out here? But the police had enough. They put him into a chokehold, and he died as a result of it. I'm not blaming the police for that. I'm blaming the fact that we have a stupid law.
Yes.
Laws require law enforcement that injects force into our society. And if you ask police officers, most of them will tell you, yeah, I spend a lot of times enforcing stupid laws that do nothing to make my community safer. They're laws that people have put into place because they didn't want to work something out with their neighbor, because they didn't want to have human interaction. And we're using law enforcement at that time to say, yeah, we can pass a law because we have a small majority. And we're going to make these laws that are going to restrict the liberty of a minority for whatever way, shape, or person. Whether it's going to be, whether or not you have to make a cake, we're going to make a law about that. Whether or not, you can smoke cigarettes in the park, right? Cambridge has made that illegal now. All these things that people don't want to work out, they want to use their authority for. And so they make laws that require law enforcement that injects force into our society. And if we can just think about that one little thing, when we start talking about how we pass laws, what's the consequence? Is this a law that we want the police to come in and have to enforce?
Right.
Take somebody to jail about it? When we take people to jail, it's not a casual thing. Once you go to jail once, your chance of ever having a successful life after that drops remarkably.
Exactly.
And
with everything being an arrestable offense now, and you just mentioned about the black community in Boston, significantly higher pullover stoppages and arrests. Again, that you're right. Your quality of life dives down. Your ability to get a better job or rise up through your job diminishes incredibly. Years ago, you and I have gray hair. I mean, when we were kids, I'm the last of 6 in my family, so I had older brothers. And I remember as a little kid, sometimes my older brother would do something stupid. The cops would bring him home.
Yeah.
Now everything is arrestable offense. So everyone gets arrested now.
I got a great story about this. It doesn't show me in a good light, but I'm coming home.
Christ, we've all been down there. Come on.
Oh, well, I'm 9 years old. I'm coming home from school, and there's wet cement. They've just poured a new sidewalk, and so I write my name in it. I'm like, all right. I go home. About an hour later, police knock on the door. My dad answers. He's like, "Does Daniel Fishman live here?" He's like, "Yes, that's my son." He's like, "Well, he had some fresh paint and he wrote his name in it." And they're like, "How'd you find us?" He's like, "Oh, you also wrote his address." My dad's response was, "Smart kid, huh?" But
he's going to go into politics someday.
Right, exactly. But what do they want me to do? They brought me down there and they had me fix it, right?
Sure.
Guy's there. He's like, "Here's the cement. Sand this out. Put it in. Good to go." And so I had to do the work.
Right. And you learned your lesson, and that was it.
Exactly right. I hadn't written my name in concrete yet since then. But that's the sort of thing. And so the whole point of the story was that I was able to give that speech in Cambridge to a group of Democrats, essentially, saying laws require law enforcement, which injects force to our society. And they ate that up. They're like, wow, he's right. Maybe we do have some stupid laws. And Democrats never say that unless we find the way to talk to them about it. And that's one of the burdens that's on us right now, is that, I this is probably going to sound unfair, but I really do believe that Democrats are much more closed-minded right now, because whatever it is, especially right now, they're in this, I don't want to say butthurt, but whatever it is. They're in this shell right now.
I think they've exposed themselves to who they've been evolving to over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, they are communists. They're into the whole power scheme of
authoritarian. I think
authoritarian.
That's the word that I would use. And I think that now they're sort of understanding, look, this is what authoritarianism looks like. And if you don't think it's attractive right now with Trump and a Republican majority in there, remember that's what it looked like when you had Obama and a Democratic majority in there. Okay? Everybody felt the same way. And think about what you guys did with that, right? You ran through healthcare. You ran through the ACA with a very small majority.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what happened, right? Republicans in the House, when they got the majority back, they voted to repeal, I think, 44 times, maybe 45. Okay? Those Republicans didn't go home and lose elections. They kept getting reelected. So the majority of the country was not in favor of this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you forced it on us. You used a very small majority to pass a law that requires law enforcement. And I would argue that's not what we're supposed to do. The idea that we have this filibuster, it's there to protect the fact that if 40% of the country, 40 senators in the Senate, feel like, you know what, this isn't something we should do, 60% is not a big enough majority to make, 59% is not a big enough majority to take away liberties from 41%. That's why we have 60-40. I always tell people, if I ever run for president, never going to happen, but if I ever run for president, my platform would be, I'm going to veto everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to veto everything. And if you want to pass it, get that 2/3 majority. Because if 2/3 of people can agree on something, I'll say, yeah, that should probably be a law. If you get that much consensus on it, that probably should be a law.
Sure.
But if not, don't restrict the liberty. Just because if 35% of the people say, we don't like this law, it shouldn't happen, we should not impose our will upon them.
Yes.
35% is a sizable majority.
Yes.
It's not a sizable majority, but it's a sizable minority. It's a large enough population that we shouldn't push our will on them. That's not what our government is for. Our government is about protecting our individual liberties.
And this is where we're at. It's draconianism now. And here's something with Trump that I'm hoping he can curtail a little bit. Again, the whole executive order thing. And I know that it's just a formality. He's just, a lot of the orders he's signing are to repeal old orders and to get rid of some of the regulations. I think now where we've reached that where we rule by fiat now. We don't. Our Congress isn't. I thought it was great that Congress stayed for the recess and voted the second time to repeal Obamacare. Phase 1 has gone through. I thought that was very good. I don't know how soon they're going to get on tax reform and all that other stuff. But I mean, it's mind-numbingly slow how they do it. Whereas these problems in America are so at the cusp right now that it requires draconianism. It requires the president going by fiat to unrust those bolts and get things moving.
The thing that bothers me the most, and that I hope that this gets worked in September, is that they agreed to raise the debt ceiling, and that's terrible. Okay, the debt ceiling is...
It's out of control. It's beyond out of control.
It's out of control. It used to be, when you and I were growing up, we used to complain, we send $1 to Washington and they give us back 90 cents. The cheap bastards. We didn't realize how good we had it.
Yeah.
Now we send $1 to Washington and they give us back $1.25 because they're borrowing money from China to buy our votes, to give services, and they don't care about the future because they're not going to be elected then. They don't care about the mess they're making. Exactly, they're borrowing. And the thing is, the founders understood this when they wrote the Constitution. They essentially said the government, under very rare occasions, if it's an emergency, the government is authorized to borrow money. But we're putting a ceiling on that because we don't want you to keep borrowing money and not balance the budget.
Sure.
There's a cap on it.
Sure.
So don't go above that cap. And they figured nobody's ever going to raise that. But they did.
That's what's happened.
And so here's a simple thing. Okay, you anybody who gets a paycheck knows. Every time you look at your paycheck, payroll taxes are taken out of there. So the government gets money every week. Okay? If we don't raise the debt ceiling, it's not like the government's broke. there's still money coming in.
Of course.
But they're actually going to have to make choices about where that money goes. Mm-hmm. They're going to pay off Social Security. They're going to pay off the armed forces. They might not be able to pay off the NEA. They might not be able to pay off, all the workers at the EPA.
Sure.
Fine. Let's make them make those tough decisions. And you know what? That's one of those things that's like politically unpopular, but that's something that Trump really could do. He could say, I'm not going to sign off on the debt ceiling. Republicans and Democrats, if you want to pass a budget and it has something in there,
we got to get rid of some stuff.
Exactly. Find a way, because we can't keep borrowing money.
And I've never bought the argument, and you've heard it too, where we want to get rid of this program or get rid of this. Well, it only accounts for a percentage of the budget. Oh, it's only a few $100 million, or it's only a couple $1 billion. It won't make that big a difference in the debt. And then a week later, they'll say, well, let's get rid of this program. The same argument comes. So by the time you're done, after a year, you've talked about 10, 15, 20 different programs. When you add all that money up, it's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what our deficit is, right? I mean, every year, that's what it is that, the American economy is actually growing. We're making more money. The problem is that we're spending more and more each time. Mm-hmm. And so there's, I think most of us could agree on probably 10 programs that we'd say, we wouldn't cut these, or we'd cut them last, okay? Food stamps. You know what? No matter how much the country is in debt, and even though I know the program is being abused, the fact remains that 1 out of 5 children in America is food insecure. Doesn't mean they're starving, but it means they don't know where their next meal is coming from. Right. That is ridiculous.
The term is very important. There's no longer starvation or hunger in America, even homeless people. I mean, for 99 cents, you can go down to Walmart and get a frozen dinner and stop at a coffee shop and use their microwave. You know what I mean?
Well, but a great example is, so when I was still teaching, as a special education teacher before I went back to school, I became a computer scientist, we kept a closet in the nurse's station, and it was filled with food. And the teachers would put food in it, and teachers don't make that much money. But any kid who wanted to, no questions asked, could come in there. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any candy in there.
Yeah, you had food, like stuff the kids...
Bread,
kid didn't eat breakfast this morning, give him some breakfast.
Exactly right. And that's what we did. And we actually, here's the thing is that, okay, we did it because we were caring people, but quite frankly, it worked better for us. Kids do better in school when they're well fed. Right. Hungry kids misbehave. They get a better education, we get better results, all these things. And, it's sort of...
Well, what's the position on this stuff now? It's mandatory. I mean, when you and I went to school, we had to have our money for lunch or we didn't eat lunch. And, unless you were on welfare at the time and that kind of thing. And even that was a special program. But now, kids go into school, they're served breakfast, they're served lunch, an afternoon snack. These trucks come from these, instead of the cafeteria, the old cafeteria ladies from our day.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they cooked the meal. You could smell lunch cooking.
Fantastic.
It was awesome. Now the kitchen is just this shell of what it used to be, and a truck shows up.
Yeah. No, there's no question
3 times a day sometimes.
And that's one of the things we talk about all the time, is that there is we talk about literacy, but one of the things that's really breaking down right now is nutritional literacy. And it happens because in schools, we're serving kids sort of boxes, lunches, that really have very little nutritional value. People don't understand that the food is actually made, and rarely do they actually see a vegetable on it. Mm-hmm. And as crazy as it sounds, that's something that affects us in healthcare, because when people don't have good nutrition, it affects their health later on.
It affects their child's ability to learn, too.
Exactly.
A child's body is growing. They need that balance of vitamins and minerals and everything else.
Right.
But I've seen some of them, and my daughter, too. She actually, past couple of years, she's like, I just don't even eat. It's like I just skip lunch and do my thing.
Right.
Because everything's fine here. We've got plenty of food in the house, so she'll eat. But she even says it, too. She's like, it's all bread, it's all carbs. I can't even recognize what some of it is.
Yeah. There is, and it's interesting, there has been sort of a movement away towards that. There's like 5 or 6 things that I would fix immediately in the way our school system works. I mean, fundamentally, libertarian. I wish more people were actively schooling their own children, something like that. Or charter schools getting together, some school system that's not necessarily run by the government. But while we still have schools that are run by the government, there's 5 or 6 courses that need to come back. Number one, civics.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there are a lot of great things that have happened in the history of mankind, but one of them is the establishment of this system of government that we have. Mm-hmm. And libertarians like to say all the time, democracy, American democracy, is without question the worst form of government, except for all the rest.
It is.
And that's what it is. And we reached this conclusion because of all the other things. And when I try to explain to kids, when I try to explain to people, I'm like, the United States, the founding fathers, they had read political documents beforehand. They had seen what had happened in England, the Magna Carta, right? The changes that had happened in France, and they brought all this together.
Well, the Greek and Roman classics were taught.
Exactly right.
That was mandatory as they were all growing up through school, right? Sure.
Exactly. And so when they put it together, they said, what is the best system that we can make? And was it perfect? No. More than that, they recognized that it wasn't perfect, and they put in the ability to amend the Constitution so that as things changed, they could. But we should study that and recognize that that was an amazing, novel idea. A government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I had always said on the show that not only was it revolutionary, I actually believed it was evolutionary. Completely changed 100%. The entire way humankind interacted and operated around the world.
Yep, there's no question
Everything
about that.
changed.
Yep, exactly. And we should understand that and recognize the fact that the noblest title you can ever be given, you can ever be called, is citizen. Because that means it's not, talking about, president or senator or anything like that. Those are elected positions, but as a citizen, we are all in this together. We have this obligation to each other. And one of the things that bothers me about what government is doing right now is that it seems to be moving us away from that idea that we all take care of each other, and instead government wants to take care of us. Bloomberg had this thing in New York City where they made it illegal for restaurants to give their food at the end of the day to homeless shelters. And that's mind-blowing, right? Because they've done it all these years. They hadn't had a problem with it.
Sure.
And Bloomberg said, it's because, nobody's inspecting that food. This food that an hour ago was safe enough to serve in a restaurant is now suddenly not safe enough to give to a homeless shelter. The problem is that they don't want private charities. They want charity to always come from the government. The government takes care of people. And I put forward that we have changed ourselves as a people in a bad way when we don't feel responsible for each other anymore. The saddest thing I ever heard on the campaign trail.
There's an emptiness inside of a person.
Yeah, because we should feel a sense of belonging to each other. And we used to have that. And I recognize the fact that the country is bigger now than it's ever been. But we had, in my neighborhood, this is about a year ago, there's a private college in Beverly called Endicott College. Some kids from Endicott went into the local park, some alcohol, trashed the place. College kids, that's what they do. Somebody put a sign up, park cleanup, Saturday, 9 a.m. So I went down. There were 30 people there, right? People I didn't really know, but it's because our neighborhood, our park, we said it's responsible. Exactly, yeah, it looked fantastic when it was done. Because we have a sense of responsibility to each other. We used to feel that thing in general for all of us as a country. This idea, like we just had VE Day yesterday, right?
Yes.
You look at the pictures in Times Square, I cannot imagine the country ever being that unified again. And the reason why is because I think that to a certain extent, the parties and our government is doing our best to separate us and to divide us and to pit us against each other. When in reality, we should not feel that way. If you and I have a political difference, it shouldn't be the sort of thing that we end up at the end of the day, we're enemies. But that's what's happened right now.
You make a great point. The polarization, I think, has led us to the point where we are now. Try to understand the connection I'm making here. Yeah. To some of these violent protests, the UC Berkeley thing, all of the stuff, because it's that polarization, it's your view against my view, and because we don't have this sense of belonging in a community, and I'm even going to throw faith and spirituality in there too, because all of that's been removed now, we have a society now where young people are completely lost, where young people feel that they're perfectly justified in setting something on fire because they're angry at the other side.
Yeah. And it's baffling.
They rationalize that now in their mind.
Because they feel
of all this stuff that we're No, you don't need to do that anymore. Government's going to take care of this. No.
Right.
So now you're left with, well, then who am I? Who am I?
Right, and it all comes down to this idea that we've had a government that has used a very small majority to inflict its will. So when somebody feels isolated, they feel like the only way they can make their point is to have this giant explosion, to act out, to destroy something. Because otherwise, if I'm just in a group of 50 people and we're in the minority, they're going to completely ignore us.
Right.
So I have to act out. I have to do it. And when reality, what should be happening is that we shouldn't be using these small majorities to impose our will on each other. We shouldn't be passing an Affordable Care Act that only 51% of the country agrees in, right? They've got it through reconciliation. Ridiculous, ridiculous that we would pass a law that sweeping with that small of a majority. And, that's symptomatic, and I don't want to just blame the ACA and the Democrats because it's been coming down the road for a long time.
I think it's also, too, this concept of that America is a democracy, and you use the term, American democracy is the worst aside from everybody else out there. I think also our young people, and not just young people, I hear people my age too, they call America democracy, and so we are able to say, well, 51% of the nation agrees with the ACA,
right.
Therefore it's law, because we're an American democracy. We are not, we are a constitutional republic.
Right.
And so this brings it back to what you would say about this small majority passing these sweeping laws affecting the other 49%
Yep.
that say, no, this is not what I want.
Right. And here's the thing that bothers me the most about that. Again, the genius of the Founding Fathers, they understood that, and they understood the temptation to rule that way, to have a tyranny of the majority, what Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about. And so what they said is that, so when we form this country, we're going to tell you, in the name of the country, what we want you to be. We don't want you to be Unified States of America. We want you to be the United States of America. But each state, you guys are going to do your own thing in there, okay? You come together for some certain things, right? National defense.
Right.
We got Congress for interstate trade, where you guys are going to dispute things with each other. But fundamentally, the states are meant to be little laboratories of democracy.
Sure.
Exercise in your state.
Technically their own countries.
Exactly. That's why they use the word state. That's why they didn't call them the United Counties of America.
Right, the United States. Right.
Exactly. And it was genius. And yet, here we are, falling away from this idea, the promise that the founders gave us, that we could have this individual state within a state, that people would find ways. And they recognize the fact that, whatever else you want to believe. So I'm not a person who talks a lot about American exceptionalism. I believe that everybody can be exceptional when they want to be. But the one thing that we do that's awesome here is we innovate. Okay? If you give Americans a problem, we're going to come up with 50 solutions to it. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Whatever else you want to say about Romney Care, okay, it came out of Massachusetts as our solution to the healthcare problem. Maybe it was right for Massachusetts, maybe not. Massachusetts, our average income is $70,000. We have a different solution than Mississippi that's $38,000.
Sure.
But whatever happened about it, if it worked, if it started to make a real difference in healthcare, started to lower prices, New Hampshire would be knocking at our door. We want to sign up.
But it did. I remember when Romney Care came out, that other states were looking at Massachusetts as a model, and they were starting to develop their own. And then, of course, as we all know, Obama got in, and Romney was, elected out.
And so what happened was when they passed the ACA, they ended all the innovation in the space of healthcare.
They didn't even use portions. I think they used some concepts of Romney Care, but by and large,
right,
they just tossed that idea right out the window.
Right, and the thing about it is why. Because if New Hampshire wanted to sign up, if Rhode Island, Connecticut, they want to join in, we have New England all on Romney Care, because it is one of those things that the more people in, the better you spread out the risk, then they would have. If it made sense for them, they would have do it. Why did we have to force everybody to sign up for the one national plan instead of letting states organically join as came along? And the reason why is power.
Yeah.
And authority.
That's it.
They want to establish their authority, and especially for the Democrats. They came in after they had to deal with 8 years of George Bush and the Iraq War and all these things. They're like, we are going to put our thumb on you. And this is it. It's the ACA. And it's terrible. And now, I don't have high hopes for this.
I talked in the show in 09, 10, and 11 with various people. Everything that we talked about then came to fruition.
Yeah, and I don't have any hopes that it's going to get any better. I don't think it's whatever. I don't think this plan is significantly better. I appreciate the fact that at least we're saying we don't think the first plan is bad, but this plan is still, an incredible. It still fundamentally supports the idea that healthcare is a right, which I will never agree to, because for me,
it's your responsibility.
Exactly. That's exactly what I say. I have a duty as a citizen, which I still believe in, that I want to support this country. And if I see somebody and I can help them, I'm going to do that. But it's voluntary, and I'm going to give them what I can. Mm-hmm. But healthcare, your healthcare is provided to you by a healthcare professional. Doctors, nurses, EMTs.
That's a private contract you enter into with that person to perform a specific task.
Exactly right. And the idea that it's a right, okay, you have a right to bear arms, you have a right to free speech, you have all these positive rights. They're not dependent on somebody else. If you have a right that depends on somebody else, they essentially work for you. They are almost your slaves.
A serfdom.
That's exactly what it is.
Serfdom.
That's exactly what it is. And so if we say that we're going to have, we have this conversation about EMTs. If we say that you have a right to health care, which means that an EMT has to be able to pick you up and get you to a hospital in 30 minutes. How are you going to fulfill that in northwestern Massachusetts, right?
Sure.
There's nothing there. If healthcare is a right, the government has to pay somebody to go there to do that, or force them to do it, right? Because they have to make sure that you got your equal protection, you have equal access to healthcare, and that's not what we're about. Healthcare is a duty. It is a noble obligation placed upon those of us who can provide it. You look at I don't remember the exact number. I want to say there's 45 Catholic hospitals in the United States. Okay. The church is not providing them out of any reason.
Birth control thing there, yeah. Right.
Well, no, but it's not an issue for me. Let them do whatever they want. Those guys are actually doing it out of a sense of obligation. They're not doing it because they feel like they're going to be forced to do anything like that. They're doing it because they're told, they believe they have a responsibility to take care of people, and that's good. That's the way it's supposed to work. And yeah, of course, I'm going to have some issues with the Catholic churches and what they do and stuff like that. But you know what? They want to give away health care because that's their creed. Do it. Please. Everybody who wants to step up and do something good for our society, please do so.
Got a couple more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I want to switch gears here.
Yep.
What happened in 16 with Johnson? I got to say it. Some of the media shots of him, his train derailed somewhere along the way. What happened?
So, two things happened. The first one was when we wanted to get into debates. That was our thing. And Gary said that in the very beginning. He said, if we don't get into debates, we've got no shot. What we didn't realize at the time is that when they changed the number to 15%, it essentially became mathematically impossible to get into the debates. And the reason why is that since the two-party dominance, since 1917, the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate have never polled below 40%. Ever. And certainly not at the same time.
Right.
So even in this worst-case scenario, let's say they're both polling at 41%. Okay? That means there's only 18% of the vote out there to be had. So the question they ask to determine who gets into the debate is, if the election were today, who would you vote for? And everybody who says, I don't know, that counts against Gary Johnson getting to that 15%.
Really?
Yep. And so we got as high as 13% in the polls. And consider that there's a legitimate fourth candidate in Jill Stein who's polling at 1%. The number is actually, I'm convinced it is mathematically impossible to get to now. And there's a couple good cases of...
10% seems like a good number to me. You have a decent demographic of the nation.
10% seems reasonable. So Ross Perot was polling at 7% when they let him into the debate, because then the criteria was 5%. He ended up at 19%.
Okay. In the final election, right.
Because he got into the debate. And you probably remember that debate too.
I do.
He performed well
there. He was great.
Yeah. Jesse Ventura, when they let him into the governor's debate in Minnesota, he was at 10%. He won the election. So the number one thing that happened to us was when we didn't get into the debates, people said, you're sitting at the kids' table. You guys aren't serious candidates. You couldn't even get into the debate. because they don't realize how difficult it is to get to that 15%. So for us to get to 13%...
And it was easy for the media to spin that to make it seem like he was small potatoes, when in fact it was just a numbers game.
Right, exactly. Well, what I like to say about it is that if we were at 13%, I like to say that we had 85% of the available vote. Okay, because people who are committed to Republican and Democrat, that 41%, they're committed, right? They're never going to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to vote for Johnson."
Right.
And so I think we did as well as almost as well as possibly done. Now, do we have the Aleppo problem? No question about it. When we were in Durham and they asked Gary Johnson to name a world leader that he admired, and he was stuck for a little while. That's a problem as well. Those are things that hurt us.
I don't admire any of them, really.
Well, so that's funny because one of the memes that came out afterwards is saying, asking a libertarian what world leader he admires is like asking a vegetarian what their favorite steak is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so the fact that he was somewhat stuck on that, I don't think of that as
yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way.
I don't think that's a terrible answer, but...
And I saw that, I thought, and that's the other thing about the way the press operates, the way they hit you with gotcha questions all the time.
Yeah.
They're designed to, let's pigeonhole this guy, let's blow him up,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to deal with him anymore, so
Right.
we can spend more time on advertising of the Republican and Democrat debate and
Yeah, exactly.
all that
That's
money.
exactly it. And I'll tell you, one of the other things about it that was really the most irritating to me was they had this thing they called the Commander-in-Chief debate. And it was only for the armed forces. They did it at Radio City Music Hall, and they had Donald Trump in one day, and they had Hillary Clinton in the other. But the candidate who was overwhelmingly the most popular with active military was Gary Johnson, by a lot, well over 50% when polling against the other three. And yet they wouldn't invite him to the Commander-in-Chief's debate. Why? Because, you say whatever else you want about Gary, he has two commitments that are very, very strong. One, you don't go to war without a declaration. You don't put troops on the ground. Congress has to declare war. And two, he's going to veto almost every spending bill. I mean, that's what he did when he was governor of New Mexico.
Sure.
In his time there, he vetoed more bills than all the other 49 governors combined.
Sure.
And you think about, all the spending bills that are coming through right now, and we talked about the debt ceiling. Those are the things that I miss the most, is that, for certain he would have done that. On the other hand, the country was ready for a revolution. Okay? Donald Trump ended up being the embodiment of that revolution. And
almost Bernie Sanders, very close.
Well, I really do believe that Sanders would have won, because I think he just had this force of kids who are willing to go out there. We'll never know. But whatever else happened, the Democrats were exposed for really trying to be in charge and run the shell game that they had.
They did.
Yeah, and there's no question.
And this is the whole thing too. Everything that they just had another hearing the other day on this whole Russian thing. 6 months here, there's still no, there's still no evidence. No, we have, but yet they keep hashing this thing out. And what I've noticed since the inauguration, actually even right after the election, is the Democrat Party. The more they keep pointing the fingers and trying to find accusations and make accusations, the more they're exposing themselves for what they actually really did. The whole when Donald Trump said, they wiretapped my building, everyone thought that Donald Trump was crazy. But the more they investigated this Russian thing, well, okay, then where did you get the information that he's been talking with the Russian? Well, we wiretapped his building.
Right.
We find out through the grapevine that,
right.
This is what you guys did.
So I have a couple thoughts about that. First of all, do I think that Russia tried to influence the election? Of course they did. Saudi Arabia tried to influence the election. Every country in the world has a vested interest in
the security of the United States. Right.
On the other hand, do I think the Russians are the ones who hacked the email? I definitely do not. Because the level of hacking was, quite frankly, pretty unsophisticated, right? It was a phishing thing that this guy clicked on and then opened it up, right, Podesta. And so I'm a computer professional, so I can speak to this technically. It was not particularly complicated. It's the sort of thing that a high school kid could easily have put together. And so we want to attribute it to the Russians. It seems very poorly done to have been actually a professional hacking level. The second thing about it is that even if it were, the number one thing that I would think about is that if you were doing something like this, why wouldn't it be a false flag? And there's a great example of this in World War II. The Germans had this spy master named Reinhard Gehlen, and he was just a genius at that sort of thing. And in fact, recruited by the United States afterwards because he had these incredible connections. But one of the things that they did was they would spy on America by sending people over pretending to be communists from Russia. Said, look, you're in the American Communist Party. I'm a Russian. The United States is not helping out Russia. It's not. And you have to help us with this. And American communists at the time said, all right, well, yeah, I can tell you a little bit about what's being made in my factory or, the supply, stuff like that. And they gave all this information to people they thought that were Russians, but were actually Nazi German spies. It is the classic false flag example.
Sure.
Why don't we think that in this case of somebody hacking it, why do we think that even if there were any evidence, and there isn't any evidence, that the Russians wouldn't either put the thing on somebody else, or why wouldn't somebody else put the bug and say, oh, it looks like it's the Russians, right? Why wouldn't they figure the Russians? So just slightly, and so please understand that I'm Jewish, I'm pro-Israel, I don't believe in foreign aid to any country, but I believe that Israel has a right to exist, and it's very important. President Obama was very anti-Israel, in my opinion.
He screwed with the election of Bibi. Yeah,
exactly right. Directly done.
Right.
So why wouldn't Israel have a little motivation
to screw it up?
Exactly right. And the Mossad are the masters of false flags.
Right. And they knew that they wouldn't have really a friend with Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. Well, I mean, Hillary would have been better than Obama. There's no question about it. He had an axe to grind. But Donald Trump is a much better friend to Israel than anybody else are going to elect. And they knew that Jared Kushner, grew up in an Orthodox family. He's going to be more sympathetic to Israel. Now, I want to clarify that I believe in ending all foreign aid to Israel and to every other country. Ron Paul famously said, foreign aid is taking money from the middle class in America and giving it to wealthy people overseas.
That's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah, which is terrible. Get rid of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, look at Africa. We've been giving foreign aid over there for decades and decades, and it just blows my mind when I see these, we have to donate today for the starving children. It's like, wait a minute, haven't we been giving billions and billions for decades and decades? Why aren't there paved roads and electricity? And
the United States government gave $1 billion to Yasser Arafat. Did that buy us friendship?
No.
No.
To this day, the Palestinian Authority and stuff, we still...
Exactly. And what are we
makes no sense.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have to debate this in Congress, you're right, I'd like to see that. And speaking about stupid little rules that you had mentioned earlier in the interview, is that in order to end foreign aid, we either have to end all foreign aid. We can't just pick and choose between our enemies and say, well, you're not getting your money anymore.
Right,
we can't pick and choose that.
And you know what? So, me personally, I would give money to Israel because that's my heritage, stuff like that. And I find it horrific that the United States gives money to Hamas. And I'm sure there are plenty of Muslim Americans who think it's terrible that we're giving money to Israel. Neither of us should be forced to support a foreign government that we don't agree with. End it all. Because we can't discriminate in terms of how we're giving out our money. We can't.
And I think what we're doing is we're flipping the coin to where we're not discriminating by giving money to everybody.
Right, which is just, that's even worse. And the problem is that, as we know, when we give charity out within the United States, you create a dependency. Okay? And that is something that we ought to think about all the time. If we want strong allies, our strong allies should be the ones that we are supporting to stand on their own, to maintain their own thing. Now, we're happy to be trading partners with people. One of the principles of libertarianism is that when people trade, it's always voluntary, and both sides do it because they get richer in the process.
Sure.
And so, all the time.
Symbiotic relationship, right? We trade with you, you trade with us, each of us get richer.
Exactly, and that's what we want. And this idea that, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so as we get wealthier together, we're going to help everybody else. We got money to buy from you now, and you're going to get wealthier, stuff like that. That's not foreign aid. That's doing business. That's us all rising up together.
You had mentioned the term dependency. Is that why there's such a kerfuffle over Donald Trump's statements of, our allies, NATO, you guys are going to have to start anteing up some more money. I think it's like 2%. He wants to increase that. And now everyone's flipping out because, again, they're so used to that check coming from the United States all of the time.
Right.
That the concept of having to maybe ante up another percentage point or two, that
I think there's
they can't deal with that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things about it that people don't realize what our foreign policy was. Our foreign policy was meant to a certain extent to keep other countries less than us. And we bought that. We bought that by giving them military aid so they wouldn't have their own tanks. We give them military aid so they don't have to have an army. Because if they don't have an army,
they can't go to war.
Exactly.
They can't invade their neighbors, and then we have to go in and straighten it all out.
Exactly.
Right.
But was it worth it? I mean, we have this era that we refer to now as the Pax Americana. Post World War II.
Yeah.
There hasn't been really
American influence all over the world, yada yada. Right.
Exactly. Well, what's the cost been to us? And the answer is the cost has been to us that we have produced, as a country, we have made more money here than the history of money, right? And what's our benefit? I mean, we have a wealthy society, but we have a very stratified society, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's so much money being made in the United States that we're spending outside that it's just ridiculous. And if we could just find a simple way to say, you know what? Our purpose, the purpose of the United States government, is to not make sure that America is better than everybody else, but to make sure that America is okay, that we should take care of ourselves. We're not in a competition. We don't have to make sure that France is worse than us. France does a good job of doing that on their own.
That's true.
Right?
So don't other countries. That's true. That's absolutely true.
Exactly. And
I see what you're saying now. Rather than this, because again, the media spins it as the libertarian position is to pull away from the world, and that's not necessarily true. You had just talked about let's open up borders for trade. Let's start trading with our partners, but not handing over the money, not intervening in their private picadillos, getting involved in their wars and everything else.
Well, and that's exactly the libertarian position.
Make sure that we're okay.
Exactly. The libertarian position is we are not isolationists at all. We are more in favor of free trade than any other party, without question. And the reason why is because trade makes us richer too.
Sure.
And so as much trading as we can do, we want to do that all the time. It has to be fair trade. It has to be free trade.
Again, so that we're okay.
Exactly. And like one of the things, the Trans-Pacific Partnership or any of these other free trade agreements, free trade does not require laws and agreements. Free trade is you and me saying...
It should just happen.
Exactly.
It should be organic.
That's exactly right. It's one of those...
oh, God, you just mentioned... This is why I've had arguments about the Commerce Clause and stuff about how it's the government's job to regulate interstate commerce. It's like you don't understand. The term regulate, as it was written in the clause of the Constitution, means to keep it regular. Not inspect, correct, and direct the whole thing. It's to allow it to be regular so that it's organic. It just happened.
Exactly right. And the Commerce Clause has been so abused. I think there are three terrible, terrible Supreme Court decisions that just crush me. One of them is Gonzalez versus Reich, in which essentially it was a couple in Oregon that was growing marijuana for their own usage. That's it. They weren't selling it or anything else. They were just growing it for their own usage. And the government busted them, and they used the Commerce Clause saying they are interfering with the regulated medical marijuana trade that is now legal, that's happening in the United States. Clarence Thomas wrote in the dissent. And, I know people have mixed feelings about Clarence Thomas, but if you read his writings, he's good. He really is.
He is. That's
great
right,
understanding. Exactly. So
I think he and Alito, now that Alito, well, we've got Gorsuch, and hopefully we'll see. Anyway, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So he wrote in the dissent, he's like, if the government can use the Commerce Clause to stop people from growing marijuana, they can use the Commerce Clause to shut down quilting bees because people are competing with the American textiles industry, people who are making...
Sure.
Yeah. And
they can shut down your vegetable garden.
Exactly right. Where does it end? And that's a real overreach. So the Commerce Clause has been so abused. It's one of those things that we have to understand that is exactly what you said. You said it exactly right. Okay? Regulate doesn't mean to control. It means to make sure.
Keep it normal.
Exactly.
Keep it regular.
Exactly. To make sure that it's not out of control.
Right.
That's a simple thing, and it is simple. You can certainly point to some points. One of my favorite quotes in the world, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. Two people of the same trade seldom meet, but the conversation ends with a conspiracy against the public. That happens a lot, right? Sometimes people get together and they say, oh, you know what? If the two of us get together, we can fix some prices, right? We own a monopoly, we own 90% of the market, something like that.
Right.
That is wrong. That's the sort of stuff the Commerce Clause is supposed to enable the government to say, look, you guys can't conspire against the American public.
That's it.
Exactly. But that's about it. Right. Other than that, there's not much that this should be doing.
And business regulations, everybody knows that business regulations aren't necessarily there to clean the environment, watch out for workers. It's to impose, again, I use the word draconian rules and regulations that other businesses can't afford.
Absolutely.
So that they end up having to go belly up. Thus now you have conspired.
Yep.
Government and big business has conspired.
Exactly right.
To
most
General Motors, Ford, Chrysler.
Libertarians always talk about the government agencies that we get rid of first, and we usually list the EPA. And the reason why, it's not because we hate the environment. We love the environment. We live in it. But what's actually happening is the EPA is being used to excuse a lot of government-based polluting. Corporations want to dump a certain amount of poison into the water. And the EPA says, okay, if it's only this much poison, that's okay. Come on. If you're putting poison in the water that's killing
poison in the water.
Exactly right.
They just had that cave-in up there at the plutonium plant up there in the northwest.
Exactly.
There's another example.
Right. Or when
Hanford or something like that. Whatever it's called.
Right. When BP dumps 1 billion gallons or however much it was into the Gulf of Mexico, the EPA came in and said, there's a cap. There's $40 billion of damages to be awarded, and that's it. That's the EPA protecting a company. If there were $45 billion of damages, we ought to be able to sue for $45 billion. Okay? Why are they restricting that part of it? And so, one of the things that we talk about all the time is that there is this collusion going on right now in the government and the corporations that is restricting our rights. And the only way to get around that is to come back to this issue that we started with at the very beginning. All power has to derive from the people. Government, states, they don't have rights. They have powers. You and I have rights. And those rights are not to be infringed upon at any point in time. And so, my right to sue you, if you've done damage to me, that shouldn't be infringed upon. The government, the EPA shouldn't come in and say, no, you can't sue this guy. Or other aspects, education, gun control, healthcare, whatever it is, we should have rights along the way. The government should not be restricting those rights. And how do we get back there? Well, there's two things about it. First is what we talked about earlier. Finding a way to talk to the people who don't get that yet. Even though it's so difficult for us. And I can tell you, there are times that I'm talking to people and they are so deep into the Kool-Aid that they bought from their party.
Certainly.
That they're not thinking. They're not thinking outside the thing. And so I know we're going a little long, but if I can tell you one more story.
You're fine.
All right. So one of the things we talk about right now, so I used to be a special education teacher, taught in Central Texas, and at one point in time, we would get people coming in, kids who had been in cults. Most famously, there was a cult in Waco, you probably remember.
Right.
So these kids came in, and they had been programmed to not hear what anybody had to say. They've been told all their life, people are going to tell you this, they're going to tell you that we're a cult, that we're dangerous, but it's not like that. They're trying to break you out of the love that we have for you. So they were prepared for it. And so we had a guy come in who was an expert on deprogramming. He said, okay, imagine this scenario. There's an arsonist, okay? And when he burns down buildings, he wants people to be trapped inside. So what he does first is he dresses up like a police officer and he knocks on the door and he tells the owner, there's a sniper in the area. And he's going to yell, fire, fire, fire. And when you come outside, he's going to shoot you. So if you hear somebody yelling, fire, 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 don't come outside. Right. Stay in your house. And then he goes around behind the house and he starts a fire. So now you see this. How do you persuade that person to come out of the house? Because you go up and you yell, fire, fire, fire.
This is true.
They're not going to come out of the house. That. If you try to pull them out of the house, they're going to fight you even more.
Sure.
So what you got to do is you got to say, I smell something. Do you smell something? It smells like smoke, but I'm not sure what it is. Do you smell that? They're like, maybe I do smell smoke. I'm like, and behind your house, there's this bright light and it's really hot and I touched it and it burned me, but I don't know, can you come take a look at it and see what it is? They'll come, they look at it like, oh my God, the house is on fire. And they'll come out.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans and the Democrats have been burning down our house for the last 100 years.
And yelling, there's a sniper out there.
Exactly right. And now, this is it. The people who are woke, we have to wake people up to the fact that now is the time for us to stand up. And it's beyond party, and it's beyond partisanship. It's about liberty. Mm-hmm. And that's our birthright. That is our birthright as Americans. And especially here in Massachusetts, right? Sons of Liberty, all that stuff. We should be a natural home for that. And we can be. And when you start talking to people about
we've
liberty,
gone so far away to, oh God.
You're right, we have.
But
that's what we can do. That's what we can wake people up to, is this idea that liberty is our birthright. And, another sort of stump speech that I give people sometimes, say, look, I don't care if you're black, white, Jewish, Chinese, Muslim, whatever you are, we are all fundamentally minorities of one. Because there's something about me that's different from you. The way I think about this, the way I think about that, we are all each minorities of one. And what we want to do is we want to protect that idea that as a minority of one, I want to protect that minority of one's rights. I should not be infringed upon by the majority. Other people shouldn't be infringed upon by the majority. When we get that idea out there, people wake up to that. And they say, wow, what did I do? What did I do to infringe on somebody else?
2018,
Yep.
What do you guys got planned?
We're going to have a good Senate candidate running. I can't reveal his name right now, but it's going to be a name that you know.
Get him here. I've already had Alan Waters on.
All right.
I'm working on Jeff Deal. I haven't heard a yes or no from Jeff, but people in his campaign have said to me, we're going to get him on the show.
Great.
So.
He should be. And then we're going to have, we're going to run a candidate for auditor. And this is my pitch. The one office where you shouldn't elect a Republican or a Democrat is auditor. Okay, the idea that the person who's going to audit the Democratic Congress should not be a Democrat.
Right.
We're going to audit the Republicans should be. And you know how people say the Libertarians are sticklers for the rules, sometimes a pain in the ass? That's what you want in an auditor.
Exactly.
So we're going to run a
Balance
strong
that
candidate
checkbook.
for auditor. Exactly right. And our platform is actually going to be very simple. All the books online all the time. Okay? The auditors are supposed to be auditing things, but the people are going to do a better job of it than the auditor's office ever will.
They want to see where the money's going.
Exactly. Why can't every transaction that the Massachusetts state government is in, be online all the time? Right? It's all in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. Put it online. Don't let people edit it, but put it online. And that seems like a very simple plan. But I promised you one other announcement.
You go right ahead.
All right. So this is the one thing I want to say. So starting in June 10th, we have, when I say we, me and a couple other friends, signed a deal with WRKO. We'll be running a show called Liberty on the Air.
No kidding.
Yep, Saturday nights at 11 to midnight.
Jeff Cooter and those guys actually allowed you to come in there, huh?
Well, what's funny about it is, you recall my, maybe you don't, my interview with Howie Carr right after the 2012 election when he was pretty mad. He felt like I cost Richard to say the election. But all that being said, we're doing a Liberty talk show. Now, 11 p.m. to 12. You can imagine it's not...
Start somewhere.
Exactly right. That's it. But I think that the time is right now, and that's the thing I can do, is that I can talk about liberty issues. And hopefully we get out there and make a little bit of difference. And I'm happy to say that I got...
Give me a call. I'd love to come down.
I would love to have you on there, and I got to tell you honestly, I've been a little bit inspired by your show, and so that was one of the things that made me...
Really?
Yeah,
Good,
absolutely.
Good.
Made me think about doing it.
Not a problem. And you had talked about what we have to do as individuals and get back more involved, more hands-on. Doing all of this is kind of like my little 2 cents. And getting involved in the Tea Party, meeting all of you people throughout all the years that I've been involved in this, it's not only woken me up, it's educated me.
Right.
It has forced me to re-examine a lot of the things that I held dear. I used to be a Democrat when I was a younger kid. I turned Republican in my later years. And now that I'm at this cathartic point now, I want to leave the Republican Party. I'm not necessarily thinking of joining the Libertarian.
No.
I've talked to my good friend Dave Kopaz about the Constitutional Party.
Yep.
And so that's more the direction I want to go. the point I'm making here is because I've met all of you people in this whole radio thing, it's my little 2 cents worth, and because I've done that, it has just opened a world of knowledge for me.
Right.
And this is not only in your work in working for campaigns, that's opened up a world of knowledge for you. Now that you're going to do it in radio, that's going to open up a whole new avenue.
I hope so.
But this is what we have to do to stay actively involved in politics. If you don't get involved in politics, you're doomed to be ruled by idiots. And
right.
I'm paraphrasing Plato there, but that's exactly what happens. So you've got to be hands-on and be proactive in it.
Yep. And what you're talking about, we learn all this stuff by doing it, and then the best thing is that with the radio show, you get to share it.
You get to share it.
Share that knowledge, and so that's where I want to go with it.
Dan, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks very much, Chris.
Always a pleasure. All right, we're going to take a break here. Let me shut this off here.